Introduction. What if the events unfolding in your life right now are not random, but part of a predictable pattern? And what if you could anticipate those shifts, especially in your career, finances, and life direction, before they fully manifest? We are very excited to present our March 2026 forecast, rooted in the timeless principles of Vedic astrology. Over the past few months, as we began providing more structured and deeper analysis, many of you have shared how closely these insights have matched real life events unfolding in your lives. And that is exactly what drives us to go deeper and bring you even more precise and practical guidance for the month ahead. Important disclaimer. Before we begin, a brief reminder. While Vedic astrology is a profound system for insight, this forecast is intended for educational purposes only. It should complement, not replace, professional advice, whether medical, legal, or financial. Use this as a tool for awareness, clarity, and better decision making as you navigate the month ahead. What makes our analysis different? What makes our analysis different is our focus on practical accuracy, not just theory. We primarily use a Lagna based approach because the ascendant represents how events actually manifest in your life. At the same time, we incorporate the moon sign, which reflects how those same events are experienced mentally and emotionally. So, when you review both your Lagna and your moon Rashi, you are not just getting one perspective, you are getting a complete and balanced view of how March 2026 will unfold for you. Methodology and references. Our analysis is based on the Sidereal Lahiri system and grounded in classical texts such as Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, Faladipika, and Saravali. We don't just look at signs, we analyze how planets activate specific houses, their lordships, and their natural significations. This gives us a structured view of the monthly transit layer, or what we call the life weather. However, for deeper accuracy, one must also consider Dasha Bhukti, the active karmic timing, Ashtaka Varga, the strength of planetary support across houses, and Shadbala, the overall strength of planets. These together refine predictions at a much more personal and precise level. How to read this forecast? This forecast is presented for both your Lagna and your moon sign. The Lagna represents the physical reality of events, while the moon sign reflects how those events are experienced internally. If you know both, we strongly recommend reviewing both sections, because that is where you get the full picture, what is happening and how it will feel. Planetary Rashi transits. Looking at the major planetary movements, this month is defined by a few key shifts. The Sun moves into Pisces mid-month, shifting focus toward deeper, more reflective themes. Mercury turns direct, restoring clarity in thinking, communication, and decisions. A major highlight is Venus becoming exalted in Pisces. This significantly enhances areas related to comfort, relationships, and financial flow. And importantly, Jupiter turns direct in Gemini, reactivating momentum in areas that may have felt stagnant or delayed, especially in growth, learning, and opportunity. Planetary nakshatra transits. Now, when we go deeper into the nakshatras, we begin to see the finer timing and subtle shifts in experience. For example, the Sun's movement from Shatabisha into Uttara Bhadrapada and Saturn's steady presence there indicates a shift from analytical correction toward deeper stabilization and introspection. This is where we understand not just what happens, but how it actually unfolds in day-to-day life. Rashi Swabhava. Rashi Swabhava helps us understand the nature and speed of results. As planets move from fixed signs into dual signs like Pisces, we see a shift from stable, predictable outcomes toward more flexible and evolving situations. This tells us that March is not a static month. It is a month of adjustment, transition, and recalibration. Tattva. From an elemental perspective, there is a clear shift from air to water. Air governs logic, movement, and communication, while water governs emotion, intuition, and depth. As key planets move into Pisces, we move from thinking into feeling, from analysis into intuition-driven decisions. And this shift becomes especially important in financial and personal choices. Natural relationship with sign lord. Finally, we look at how comfortable planets are in the signs they occupy, because this determines how smoothly results manifest. For example, Venus exalted in Pisces allows its results to flow strongly and naturally, enhancing comfort and financial themes. And the Sun moving from an enemy sign into a friendly sign signals a transition where effort begins to produce more supportive and visible results. This is where we start seeing friction reduce and outcomes improve. Aries, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a transition in energy from external engagement to internal reflection, followed by a renewed sense of personal drive toward the end of the month. The early part of the month supports social interaction, networking, and engagement with groups, while the mid phase encourages withdrawal, introspection, and emotional recalibration. This shift is important for resetting priorities and aligning actions with deeper goals. In relationships and family matters, the early phase is socially active and supportive, with increased interactions and engagement. However, the mid month period may bring emotional sensitivity, distance, or a need for personal space, which should be managed carefully to avoid misunderstandings. Venus in Pisces enhances emotional depth and compassion, but may also create idealization or unrealistic expectations. Toward the end of the month, there is a shift toward direct communication and renewed relationship energy, making it a favorable time to reconnect or initiate new bonds. From a health and energy perspective, the mid month period requires attention to rest, sleep, and overall recovery. There may be tendencies toward fatigue, overthinking, or irregular routines, especially if workload or mental activity is high. Mars supports mental engagement and activity, but also increases restlessness, making it important to maintain balance through structured routines. In terms of learning, skills, and personal growth, this is a highly favorable period for developing communication skills, acquiring practical knowledge, and engaging in self driven learning. Efforts made in upgrading skills or exploring new areas of expertise can yield meaningful long term benefits. Overall, this phase of the month supports inner alignment, emotional clarity, and preparation, setting the foundation for more visible and action oriented progress toward the end of the month. Aries, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 presents a structured financial and professional cycle of gains, reinvestment, and self driven opportunity. The early part of the month supports income generation, gains through networks, and benefits from organizational or institutional setups, making it favorable for bonuses, commissions, and collaborative earnings. As the month progresses, there is a clear shift toward expenses, capital allocation, and reinvestment, particularly into areas such as business development, tools, education, or infrastructure. This phase should be viewed as a strategic investment period rather than a financial setback, but it requires discipline to avoid unnecessary or comfort driven spending, especially under the influence of Venus. From a career perspective, the early phase supports visibility, team support, and alignment with organizational goals, while the mid month period may bring reduced outward recognition and a shift toward behind the scenes work. This is a time for planning, restructuring, and preparing for future moves rather than immediate changes. Toward the end of the month, there is a strong improvement in confidence, personal visibility, and professional appeal, making it a favorable period for interviews, negotiations, or role transitions. In business and entrepreneurial matters, the month follows a gain to invest to execute cycle. Initial gains arise from existing networks and channels, followed by a phase focused on back end improvements, strategic planning, and reinvestment. The latter part of the month is particularly supportive for launching new initiatives, scaling operations, or strengthening personal branding efforts. Regarding debt and financial obligations, this is a period where existing liabilities can be managed through structured planning, but caution is advised against taking on new or unnecessary financial burdens, especially during the mid month phase of increased expenses. Taurus, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a shift from career focused intensity toward social expansion and inner recalibration for Taurus natives. The early part of the month emphasizes responsibility, public image, and structured effort, while the mid to late phase transitions into networking, gains through associations, and eventual introspection. This creates a rhythm of external achievement followed by internal alignment. In relationships and family matters, the early phase may feel duty oriented, where responsibilities and commitments take precedence over emotional expression. As the month progresses, there is increased involvement with friends, networks, and social circles, which can bring both support and new connections. However, toward the later part of the month, there may be a tendency toward withdrawal or emotional distance, requiring conscious effort to maintain balance in close relationships. Emotional expectations should be managed carefully to avoid misunderstandings. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports discipline and structured routines, but can also bring mental pressure or fatigue due to responsibilities. The later phase may introduce irregular routines, sleep disturbances, or a need for rest, especially if social or professional demands are high. It is important to maintain consistency in habits and avoid overexertion. In terms of learning, skills, and personal growth, the month supports practical learning, professional development, and expansion through networks or group based environments. There is strong potential to gain insights through collaboration, mentorship, or exposure to new ideas, particularly in fields related to career advancement or business growth. Taurus: finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a career driven and financially strategic month for Taurus natives, with a clear progression from professional responsibility to income gains and eventual financial planning. The early part of the month strongly activates the 10th house, career, authority, public image, bringing focus to responsibility, performance, and recognition. This is a period where effort, discipline, and visibility can lead to meaningful professional progress. From a finance perspective, the transition into the 11th house mid month brings opportunities for income growth, gains through networks, and fulfillment of financial goals. This is particularly favorable for those working in corporate environments, large organizations, or collaborative setups, as well as those involved in digital platforms, consulting, or trading. Gains may come through bonuses, incentives, or expanded client networks. However, toward the later part of the month, there is a shift toward the 12th house, indicating expenses, investments, or financial outflows, which should be managed carefully. In terms of career and job, the early phase is highly favorable for recognition, authority, and alignment with leadership or management. This is a time to demonstrate capability and take ownership of responsibilities. The mid month period enhances support from peers, teams, and networks, making it a good time for collaboration and leveraging connections. Toward the end of the month, the focus shifts toward planning, internal restructuring, or preparing for future transitions rather than immediate visible progress. From a business standpoint, the month follows a build to gain to invest cycle. The early phase supports establishing credibility and strengthening professional positioning, while the mid phase is favorable for client acquisition, partnerships, and revenue growth through networks. The later phase may require reinvestment into business infrastructure, tools, or strategy, which, if managed well, can support long term growth. Regarding debt and financial obligations, this is a period where existing liabilities can be managed effectively through disciplined planning, especially during the early and mid phases. However, caution is advised toward the end of the month to avoid unnecessary financial commitments or unplanned expenses. Gemini: health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a dynamic mix of expansion, responsibility, and shifting focus for Gemini natives. With Jupiter in the Lagna, there is a strong underlying theme of growth, confidence, and self development. But the month also demands balance between personal ambition and external responsibilities. The early part of the month emphasizes higher learning, guidance, and long term thinking, while the later phase shifts toward career focus and structured effort. In relationships and family matters, the month begins with a more philosophical and understanding approach, where communication improves and there is openness to new perspectives. However, as responsibilities increase, there may be reduced time or emotional availability, which can create some distance if not managed consciously. Maintaining clear communication and realistic expectations will help sustain harmony. From a health and energy perspective, Jupiter in the Lagna generally supports overall vitality and recovery, but there may still be phases of mental overload or fatigue, especially as career responsibilities increase. It is important to maintain consistency in routines and avoid overcommitting, particularly during the latter part of the month. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a highly favorable period for expanding knowledge, skill development, and gaining insights through mentors or structured learning environments. Efforts made in education, certifications, or strategic thinking can yield strong long-term benefits. Gemini, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a career-defining and financially progressive month for Gemini natives, with a clear emphasis on professional visibility, structured growth, and effort-driven gains. Jupiter in the Lagna enhances confidence, decision-making, and expansion, while the Sun's movement into the 10th house later in the month brings focus on career, authority, and recognition. From a finance perspective, the early part of the month supports opportunities through knowledge, advisory roles, consulting, or skill based income, while the later phase enhances income potential through career growth and professional recognition. Gains are likely to come through structured efforts, promotions, or increased responsibilities rather than sudden windfalls. Financial stability improves gradually, provided spending remains controlled. In terms of career and job, the month begins with a focus on planning, learning, and aligning with long term goals, while the later phase strongly supports visibility, recognition, and leadership opportunities. This is a favorable time to take initiative, demonstrate expertise, and position oneself for advancement. Those seeking job changes may find better opportunities toward the latter part of the month. From a business standpoint, this is a period of strategic expansion and structured execution. Jupiter supports growth through knowledge, advisory services, and communication driven businesses, while the later part of the month favors scaling operations and strengthening professional credibility. Consistent effort and clear strategy will be key drivers of success. Regarding debt and financial obligations, this is a manageable period where liabilities can be handled through disciplined planning and steady income flow. However, caution is advised against overexpansion or taking on unnecessary financial commitments without proper evaluation. Cancer. Health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a transformational and introspective phase for Cancer natives, with a strong focus on inner growth, emotional depth, and shifting perspectives. The early part of the month emphasizes sudden changes, adjustments, or deeper realizations, while the later phase supports higher learning, guidance, and a more optimistic outlook. This creates a movement from intensity toward clarity and direction. In relationships and family matters, the early phase may bring emotional sensitivity, misunderstandings, or deeper discussions, especially around shared responsibilities or expectations. There may be a need to address underlying issues rather than surface level concerns. As the month progresses, there is improvement in understanding, communication, and emotional balance, making it easier to restore harmony. Patience and openness will be key in maintaining stability. From a health and energy perspective, the early part of the month requires attention to stress management, emotional well being, and physical recovery, as there may be tendencies toward fatigue or overthinking. The later phase supports improved energy levels and a more balanced routine, especially if discipline is maintained. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a powerful period for deep learning, research oriented thinking, and gaining insights through experience or guidance. The latter part of the month is particularly favorable for structured learning, spiritual growth, and expanding knowledge in meaningful areas. Cancer. Finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a strategic and evolving financial period for Cancer natives, with a transition from uncertainty or fluctuation towards structured growth and opportunity. The early part of the month activates the 8th house, bringing sudden financial movements, shared resources, or unexpected expenses, which may require careful management. However, this phase also supports long term planning, restructuring, and addressing financial complexities. From a finance perspective, the early phase may feel unstable or unpredictable, with possible involvement in taxes, insurance, loans, or joint finances. This is a time to review financial strategies and avoid high-risk decisions. As the month progresses, the shift toward the ninth house brings improvement in financial outlook, opportunities through guidance, and support from mentors or higher institutions. This phase can open doors for growth through learning, advisory roles, or long-term planning. In terms of career and job, the early phase may bring uncertainty, hidden challenges, or the need to navigate complex situations, especially in organizational environments. This is a time for strategic thinking rather than reactive decisions. The later phase supports career growth through knowledge, guidance, and alignment with long-term goals, making it favorable for skill development, certifications, or exploring new opportunities. From a business standpoint, the month begins with a need for caution, risk assessment, and restructuring, particularly in areas involving shared investments or financial dependencies. As clarity improves later in the month, there is better support for expansion, advisory services, and long-term business planning. Growth is more likely through strategic decisions rather than rapid execution. Regarding debt and financial obligations, this is an important period to review, restructure, or manage existing liabilities carefully, especially in the early phase. Avoid taking on new financial risks or obligations without thorough evaluation. Leo. Health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a relationship focused and transformational phase for Leo natives, with a shift from external engagement toward deeper emotional and psychological alignment. The early part of the month emphasizes partnerships, collaboration, and interactions with others, while the later phase moves into introspection, inner change, and personal recalibration. This creates a movement from external dependency toward internal strength. In relationships and family matters, the early phase highlights partnership dynamics, where cooperation, communication, and mutual understanding are essential. There may be important discussions or decisions involving spouse, partners, or close associates. As the month progresses, the energy becomes more intense and inward, which may bring emotional sensitivity or the need to address deeper issues. Managing expectations and maintaining open communication will be important for stability. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase is relatively stable, but the later part of the month may bring fluctuations in energy, stress, or the need for rest and recovery. There may be tendencies toward overthinking or emotional strain, so maintaining balanced routines and mental discipline is important. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a strong period for understanding complex subjects, gaining insights through experience, and exploring deeper knowledge or research oriented areas. The later phase especially supports transformational learning and inner development. Leo. Finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a financially and professionally sensitive but strategically important month for Leo natives, with a shift from partnership driven outcomes to financial restructuring and deeper planning. The early part of the month activates the seventh house, bringing focus to partnerships, clients, agreements, and collaborative work, while the later phase moves into the eighth house, indicating financial adjustments, shared resources, and transformation. From a finance perspective, the early phase supports income through partnerships, clients, and collaborative ventures, making it favorable for those involved in business partnerships, consulting, or client facing roles. However, as the month progresses, there may be fluctuations, unexpected expenses, or involvement in shared financial matters, requiring careful management. This is not a period for high risk financial decisions, but rather for reviewing, restructuring, and stabilizing financial positions. In terms of career and job, the early phase supports collaboration, negotiations, and working closely with others, which can lead to progress if handled effectively. However, the later phase may bring complex situations, hidden challenges, or reduced visibility, requiring a more strategic and patient approach. This is a time to focus on internal adjustments and long term positioning rather than immediate outcomes. From a business standpoint, the month begins with opportunities for client acquisition, partnerships, and deal making, but shifts toward a phase where risk management, financial restructuring, and back end planning become critical. Business owners should focus on stability, compliance, and strengthening financial foundations rather than aggressive expansion. Regarding debt and financial obligations, this is a key period to review existing liabilities, manage shared financial commitments, and avoid taking on unnecessary risk. Careful planning and disciplined financial decisions will be essential. Virgo, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a structured and relationship oriented phase for Virgo natives, with a shift from routine, discipline, and problem solving toward partnerships and interpersonal alignment. The early part of the month emphasizes work, responsibilities, and daily routines, while the later phase highlights relationships, collaboration, and external engagement. This creates a transition from self focused effort to interaction with others. In relationships and family matters, the early phase may feel practical and responsibility driven, with focus on duties rather than emotional expression. As the month progresses, relationships take center stage, bringing opportunities for connection, collaboration, and strengthening partnerships. However, this may also bring differences in expectations or the need for compromise, making communication and flexibility important. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports discipline, routine, and structured habits, making it a good time to improve lifestyle patterns. However, there may be tendencies toward overwork, stress, or mental fatigue, especially if responsibilities increase. The later phase requires maintaining balance, as increased social or relational demands may affect routines. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a favorable period for practical skill development, problem solving, and gaining insights through real world application. The later part of the month supports learning through interaction, feedback, and collaboration, which can enhance understanding and perspective. Virgo, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a work driven and partnership influenced financial period for Virgo natives, with a progression from effort based stability to opportunity through collaboration. The early part of the month strongly activates the sixth house, bringing focus to workload, service, competition, and problem solving, while the later phase shifts to the seventh house, highlighting partnerships, clients, and business interactions. From a finance perspective, the early phase supports steady income through work, service, and consistent effort, particularly in roles that require analysis, problem solving, or operational execution. Financial progress is gradual and tied to discipline and performance. As the month progresses, opportunities may arise through clients, partnerships, or collaborative ventures, which can enhance income potential if managed effectively. In terms of career and job, the early phase is demanding, requiring focus, efficiency, and the ability to handle pressure or competition. This is a time to demonstrate capability and resolve challenges, which can strengthen professional standing. The later phase improves visibility through collaboration and interaction, making it favorable for negotiations, teamwork, and client facing roles. From a business standpoint, the month follows a stabilize to collaborate cycle. The early phase supports operational efficiency, process improvement, and handling existing workloads, while the later phase opens opportunities for client acquisition, partnerships, and business expansion through collaboration. Success depends on maintaining quality and consistency. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the early phase is favorable for managing liabilities, clearing dues, or resolving financial disputes, as the sixth house supports overcoming challenges. However, caution is advised when entering into new financial agreements or partnerships, ensuring that terms are clearly defined. Libra, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a creative and productivity driven phase for Libra natives, with a shift from self expression and enjoyment toward discipline, routines, and practical responsibilities. The early part of the month supports creativity, learning, and emotional expression, while the later phase emphasizes work, structure, and daily responsibilities. This creates a transition from inspiration to execution. In relationships and family matters, the early phase is favorable for romantic expression, bonding, and emotional connection, with opportunities to strengthen relationships through communication and shared experiences. However, as responsibilities increase later in the month, there may be reduced time or focus on relationships, which can create imbalance if not managed consciously. Maintaining consistency and communication will help sustain harmony. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports mental relaxation and creative engagement, but the later phase may bring increased workload, stress, or pressure, requiring attention to routine, diet, and rest. There may be tendencies toward overwork or irregular habits, so maintaining balance is important. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a favorable period for creative learning, strategic thinking, and skill development, particularly in areas that combine intellect and creativity. The later phase supports practical application of knowledge and structured improvement, making it a good time to refine skills. Libra, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a progressive and effort driven financial month for Libra natives, with a clear movement from creative income opportunities towards structured work and financial stability. The early part of the month activates the fifth house, supporting speculative gains, creative ventures, and income through intelligence or skills, while the later phase shifts to the sixth house, emphasizing work, service, and disciplined financial management. From a finance perspective, the early phase may bring opportunities for gains through creative efforts, trading, or skill based activities, but these should be approached with calculated risk rather than impulsive decisions. The later phase supports steady income through consistent work and structured effort, helping stabilize financial flow. This is a period where discipline and consistency play a key role in financial growth. In terms of career and job, the early phase supports innovation, creative thinking, and strategic planning, while the later phase demands execution, responsibility, and attention to detail. This is a time to translate ideas into action and demonstrate reliability, which can strengthen professional standing. Opportunities may arise through increased responsibilities or problem solving roles. From a business standpoint, the month follows a create to execute cycle. The early phase supports idea generation, innovation, and exploring new opportunities, while the later phase is focused on implementation, operations, and handling workload efficiently. Business growth depends on the ability to convert creative ideas into structured processes. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the later phase is favorable for managing liabilities, clearing dues, and improving financial discipline, as the sixth house supports overcoming financial challenges. However, caution is advised against speculative risks in the early phase without proper evaluation. Scorpio, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a foundation focused and creative transformation phase for Scorpio natives, with a shift from home, stability, and emotional grounding toward creativity, expression, and outward engagement. The early part of the month emphasizes family, domestic matters, and inner stability, while the later phase supports creativity, self expression, and enjoyment. This creates a movement from internal grounding to external expression. In relationships and family matters, the early phase highlights family responsibilities, home related discussions, or focus on emotional security, which may require attention and involvement. As the month progresses, there is a shift toward romantic expression, bonding, and lighter interactions, improving overall relationship dynamics. However, balancing family obligations and personal desires will be important. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports rest, recovery, and emotional stability, but there may be tendencies toward inertia or low motivation if routines are not maintained. The later phase improves energy, enthusiasm, and engagement, making it easier to stay active and productive. In terms of learning and personal growth, the early phase supports introspection, foundational learning, and planning, while the later phase is favorable for creative thinking, strategic ideas, and applying knowledge in practical ways. This is a good time to align inner clarity with external action. Scorpio, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a gradually improving financial and professional month for Scorpio natives, with a progression from stability and groundwork toward creative income opportunities and calculated growth. The early part of the month activates the fourth house, bringing focus to stability, assets, and foundational financial planning, while the later phase shifts to the fifth house, supporting creative income, speculation, and strategic opportunities. From a finance perspective, The early phase emphasizes financial stability, savings, and asset-related decisions, including matters related to property, home, or long-term investments. This is a period to consolidate and strengthen financial foundations. As the month progresses, opportunities may arise for gains through creative ventures, trading, or skill-based activities, but these should be approached with calculated risk and disciplined strategy. In terms of career and job, the early phase may feel steady but less dynamic, with focus on maintaining stability and fulfilling responsibilities. This is not a period for aggressive change, but rather for strengthening one's position. The later phase improves creativity, visibility, and initiative, making it favorable for presenting ideas, taking calculated risks, or exploring new roles or opportunities. From a business standpoint, the month follows a stabilized to expand cycle. The early phase supports building systems, managing resources, and strengthening operational foundations, while the later phase opens opportunities for innovation, marketing, and growth through creative strategies. Business success depends on balancing stability with calculated expansion. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the early phase is suitable for managing liabilities and improving financial security, while caution is advised in the later phase to avoid speculative risks or overextension without proper evaluation. Sagittarius: health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a dynamic and mentally active phase for Sagittarius natives, with a shift from communication, movement, and short term engagement toward home, stability, and emotional grounding. The early part of the month emphasizes efforts, interactions, and skill application, while the later phase supports family matters, inner balance, and establishing stability. This creates a transition from external activity to internal alignment. In relationships and family matters, the early phase is active, with increased communication and interaction with siblings, peers, or close contacts, which can strengthen connections if handled positively. As the month progresses, focus shifts toward family, home environment, and emotional comfort, bringing opportunities to improve domestic harmony. However, balancing external commitments and family responsibilities will be important. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports activity, movement, and engagement, but may also lead to restlessness or scattered energy if not managed well. The later phase encourages rest, emotional balance, and stabilization of routines, making it important to maintain consistency in habits. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a favorable period for developing practical skills, communication abilities, and short term learning initiatives. The later phase supports deeper understanding and applying knowledge toward building long term stability, especially in areas related to home or foundational goals. Sagittarius: finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a steady and effort driven financial month for Sagittarius natives, with a progression from self initiated efforts towards stability and structured financial planning. The early part of the month activates the third house, supporting effort based income, communication driven opportunities, and short term gains, while the later phase shifts to the fourth house, emphasizing financial stability, assets, and long term planning. From a finance perspective, the early phase supports income through personal effort, communication, consulting, sales, or skill based activities, making it favorable for those involved in digital platforms, trading, or independent work. However, gains are tied to consistent effort rather than passive income. The later phase shifts focus towards saving, asset building, and financial security, making it a good time to consolidate gains and plan long term investments. In terms of career and job, the early phase supports initiative, networking, and taking proactive steps, particularly in roles that require communication, coordination, or multitasking. The later phase brings a more stable and grounded approach, with focus on establishing security and maintaining consistency in work. This is a favorable period for strengthening one's position rather than making abrupt changes. From a business standpoint, the month follows an initiate to stabilize cycle. The early phase supports marketing, outreach, and client engagement, while the later phase is better suited for building systems, improving operational stability, and focusing on long term sustainability. Business growth depends on balancing active effort with structured planning. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the later phase is favorable for managing liabilities, improving financial discipline, and reducing unnecessary expenses. However, caution is advised in the early phase to avoid overcommitting resources or taking on obligations without proper planning. Capricorn: health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a practical and value driven phase for Capricorn natives, with a shift from financial focus and self worth toward communication, movement, and active engagement. The early part of the month emphasizes stability, resources, and personal values, while the later phase supports interaction, learning, and dynamic activity. This creates a transition from grounded focus to active expression. In relationships and family matters, the early phase highlights family, values, and financial discussions, which may require practical decision making and clarity. As the month progresses, communication becomes more active, bringing opportunities to resolve misunderstandings, strengthen connections, and engage more openly. However, care should be taken to avoid miscommunication or impulsive speech, especially during busy periods. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports stability and routine, but there may be tendencies toward inertia or low motivation if energy is not actively managed. The later phase increases activity, movement, and mental engagement, which can improve overall vitality but may also lead to restlessness if not balanced. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a favorable period for developing communication skills, practical learning, and short term skill enhancement. The later phase supports learning through interaction, networking, and real world application, making it a good time to expand knowledge in applied areas. Capricorn: finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a financially focused and progressively active month for Capricorn natives, with a transition from resource management toward effort based income and expansion. The early part of the month activates the second house, bringing focus to income, savings, and financial stability, while the later phase shifts to the third house, supporting effort driven gains, communication based opportunities, and initiative. From a finance perspective, the early phase supports income stability, accumulation of resources, and careful financial planning. This is a favorable time to strengthen savings and manage expenditures effectively. As the month progresses, opportunities may arise for additional income through personal effort, side activities, consulting, or communication driven work, which can enhance overall financial flow. In terms of career and job, the early phase emphasizes stability and maintaining one's position, with focus on consistent performance and financial security. The later phase supports taking initiative, networking, and exploring new opportunities, particularly in roles that require communication, coordination, or multitasking. This is a good time to actively engage and create new avenues for growth. From a business standpoint, the month follows a stabilize to expand cycle. The early phase supports financial planning, resource management, and strengthening existing operations, while the later phase opens opportunities for marketing, outreach, and generating new business through effort and communication. Success depends on consistent action and strategic engagement. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the early phase is favorable for managing liabilities, improving savings, and reducing unnecessary expenses, while the later phase requires caution to avoid overcommitting or taking on obligations without proper evaluation. Aquarius: health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a personality driven and value shifting phase for Aquarius natives, with a transition from self focus and personal direction toward finances, values, and stability. The early part of the month emphasizes self expression, identity, and personal initiative, while the later phase shifts toward practical concerns, resources, and grounding. This creates a movement from self driven action to value based alignment. In relationships and family matters, the early phase may bring a stronger focus on personal needs and independence, which can sometimes create imbalance if not aligned with others. As the month progresses, there is greater emphasis on family, values, and practical stability, which can support more grounded and stable interactions. Clear communication and balanced expectations will help maintain harmony. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase supports confidence, initiative, and active engagement, but there may be tendencies toward overexertion or impulsive actions. The later phase encourages a more stable and routine-based approach, making it important to maintain consistency in habits, diet, and rest. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a favorable period for self development, refining personal goals, and aligning actions with long term values. The later phase supports practical learning and applying knowledge toward building stability and security. Aquarius, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a financially significant and progressively stabilizing month for Aquarius natives, with a shift from self driven effort toward income consolidation and resource management. The early part of the month activates the first house, emphasizing initiative, decision making, and personal effort, while the later phase moves into the second house, highlighting income, savings, and financial stability. From a finance perspective, the early phase is driven by self effort, independent decisions, and personal initiatives, which can create opportunities for income but may also involve fluctuations or uncertainty. As the month progresses, there is a stronger focus on steady income, accumulation of resources, and financial planning, making it a favorable time to stabilize finances and build savings. In terms of career and job, the early phase supports taking initiative, redefining roles, and asserting oneself professionally, which can create new opportunities if approached strategically. The later phase supports stability, consistent performance, and financial alignment, making it a good time to strengthen one's position and focus on long term security. From a business standpoint, the month follows an initiate to stabilize cycle. The early phase supports new ideas, independent action, and exploring opportunities, while the later phase is focused on financial management, pricing strategies, and revenue consolidation. Business success depends on balancing innovation with disciplined financial control. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the later phase is favorable for managing liabilities, improving savings discipline, and strengthening financial security, while caution is advised in the early phase to avoid impulsive financial decisions or overextension. Pisces, health, relationships, mindset, learning, and overall life themes. March 2026 brings a deeply introspective yet empowering phase for Pisces natives, with a transition from inner reflection and closure towards self activation and renewed direction. The early part of the month emphasizes rest, isolation, and internal processing, while the later phase shifts strongly towards self expression, confidence, and forward movement. This creates a movement from closure to new beginnings. In relationships and family matters, the early phase may bring distance, introspection, or emotional withdrawal, where Pisces natives may prefer solitude or reflection over active engagement. This can create temporary disconnect if not communicated clearly. As the month progresses, there is a noticeable shift toward greater openness, confidence, and willingness to engage, improving relationship dynamics and creating opportunities for reconnection. From a health and energy perspective, the early phase requires attention to rest, recovery, and mental well being, as there may be tendencies toward fatigue, low energy, or overthinking. The later phase significantly improves vitality, confidence, and overall energy levels, making it easier to take action and maintain consistency. In terms of learning and personal growth, this is a powerful period for introspection, spiritual growth, and understanding deeper patterns during the early phase. The later phase supports practical application of insights and taking decisive steps toward personal goals, making it a good time to align inner clarity with external action. Overall, this month supports closure, healing, and a strong personal reset, helping Pisces natives step into a more confident and action oriented phase. Pisces, finance, career, business, and debt focus. March 2026 is a transition month from financial outflow and planning towards self driven income and renewed opportunity for Pisces natives. The early part of the month activates the 12th house, bringing focus to expenses, investments, and behind the scenes financial activity, while the later phase shifts to the first house, emphasizing self effort, initiative, and new financial beginnings. From a finance perspective, the early phase may involve higher expenses, investments, or allocation of resources, particularly toward areas such as business, learning, or personal development. This should be viewed as a strategic investment phase rather than a loss phase, provided spending is controlled. As the month progresses, there is a shift towards self-generated income, independent opportunities, and improved financial control, making it a favorable time to rebuild and strengthen financial position. In terms of career and job, the early phase may feel low visibility or slower progress, with focus on internal work, planning, or preparation rather than external recognition. This is a time to refine strategies and align with long-term goals. The later phase brings improved confidence, visibility, and initiative, making it favorable for new roles, interviews, or professional repositioning. From a business standpoint, the month follows a invest to initiate cycle. The early phase supports back-end work, planning, and strategic investment, while the later phase is highly favorable for launching new initiatives, promoting services, or strengthening personal branding. Success depends on transitioning from planning to decisive execution. Regarding debt and financial obligations, the early phase requires careful management of expenses and avoidance of unnecessary financial commitments, while the later phase supports regaining control and improving financial discipline.